Hello, Burbankers, and welcome back to the Mike and Roy Show. Roy and I are here with more candidates for the upcoming election, City Council member candidates, and we're here right now with Paul Herman, a candidate, and he's been so kind to join us here so that hopefully members of the community can get to know you a little better. And
thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're going to get right to the questions. We've asked the same questions to all the candidates so far, and we're going to do the same for you and see how you feel about some of the topics that are important to us and, say, Burbank neighborhoods.
Certainly.
First of all, the Burbank Airport plans to expand the terminal to 150% of its existing size. We know the plan is to replace the 14 gates with 14 gates, but with the expansion of the terminal, we're likely to see a dramatic increase in air and ground traffic. What are your thoughts on airport expansion at Burbank Airport?
Sure, it's a really good question, and there's three things that come to mind for me. First off, it's the safety aspect. We know that the FAA said that the airport, where it sits now, with its proximity to the runway, is way too close for current safety standards. The airport was built in 1929, so it's over 90 years old. I think that they're flying biplanes when they opened up. So number one, we need to replace the terminal because of safety. Public safety is paramount. Number two is, it's about building a better terminal, not necessarily a bigger terminal, right? I mean, this airport is one of the best airports in the country. People love Burbank Airport, Hollywood Burbank Airport, because it's so convenient. I'll pay the extra $20-30 a ticket to go fly out of there instead of having to, get on the 405 to LAX. It's the front door to our city, right? I mean, we have millions of people who come to Burbank every year through that airport. And we call ourselves a world-class city, so we should have a world-class airport. So I really would like to see a new terminal because I think it's befitting our city. Thirdly, and this is kind of paramount, and right now we're dealing with this pandemic. We've seen that air traffic is off nationwide about 76%. That's led to just basically devastation in our hospitality and tourism industry, especially here in Burbank. Our occupancy rates for our hotels now are 27%. We've had, when you look nationwide, tens of thousands of layoffs and furloughs within the airlines. The impact with Hollywood Burbank Airport has been devastating. So when we get concerned about, growth and congestion and too much traffic, well, kind of look at what happens if in the opposite, right? When we have this kind of economic calamity, that's not healthy either. We need to find a good balance. So, I was in favor of the new terminal. I still am. It looks like it's going to be pushed back another maybe 5 years because it's going to take a long time for the tourism industry to recover to the point where they're going to be able to justify financing a new terminal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Police corruption, abuse, and systemic racism have been a major problem in law enforcement agencies across the U.S. How would you rate BPD's record on these issues?
So we all know that were incidents in the past, the Portos incident and things of that nature about a decade ago or over a decade ago, that led to calls for reform within our city. And I think that has happened to a great degree. We brought a new command staff. They've made, tremendous improvements, I think, in the professionalism of our police force. They've brought in, greater oversight and transparency into our police force. So, I'm satisfied that what we've seen, in the past few months with the calls for, reimagining police forces, defunding police forces, reforming police forces, we've actually done that over the course of the last decade here in Burbank. I think, BPD is kind of the role model that other cities throughout and communities throughout the country should be looking at. So I think the men and women serving, BPD are fantastic. We actually have a police force that's more diverse than the population, the residents who actually live in the city of Burbank. I have a very favorable view of our police department right now.
Thank you. Exceeding high salaries throughout our city staff have been a major concern for Burbank residents. Staff disagrees and argues that their salaries are in line with those of comparable communities and essential in order to retain employees. Our research and the high turnover rate among staff disputes that. What are your thoughts on staff salaries?
So I think sometimes there's a misperception about the salaries that the staff gets paid, because the way it's reported is the total cost to employ somebody with the city. So it's not necessarily, just their take-home pay, right? It's all those ancillary costs that go into it. It's the total cost of their benefits, the taxes paid on behalf of them, the payroll taxes and all of that. I can tell you my wife is a LAUSD teacher, and so her salary is public, and I've looked it up, and I've seen, wow, you actually make that much money? But it's nowhere near what her actual take-home pay is, right? I mean, what gets reported and what actually is in your pocket are two very different things. That being said, I tend to be very fiscally conservative, and so these are issues that I look at very closely and kind of want to be a watchdog for. I think now, if we are going to look, now is kind of the time, due to the COVID pandemic, and what I see is kind of an economic crisis looming down the road for us. We're kind of at the tip of the iceberg for what is bound to happen. Now is the time more than ever that we can actually institute some reforms, I think, in the cost of employing city employees, city staff. But also, if we're ever going to look at, diving into those salaries a little bit, the retention argument is going to kind of go out the window, because if you have a job right now, you're very fortunate to have a job. I've seen, I work in the business to business professionally, and I know that businesses that I work with have everybody from the top down have had to take big cuts, 20%, 40%, 50% cuts in salaries just to keep their companies afloat. I don't know. I don't know if it's fair that when we look at our government, we wouldn't have the same expectation that they would take cuts, similar to what happens in private industry.
Thank you.
Thank you. You want to talk about development impact fees, Roy? You've done a lot of research on those.
Sure. I will do that. Number 5. Okay. Thanks, Mike. Our neighboring, we're going to go out of order a little bit here.
That's okay.
I think you're good with that. Our neighboring communities charge developers a fee per unit that they build, but the fees are much, much higher than the fees charged in Burbank. These development impact fees could greatly benefit our community, but our city council and staff are very hesitant to raise fees to the level of our neighbors. What are your views on the DIFs? And do you feel our low fees are encouraging developers to replace much of our affordable housing with units that are too expensive for most of our current residents?
So the last part of that question, are developers replacing much of our affordable housing with housing that is too expensive or more expensive than what's existing? I want to ask you guys, how many units do you think have been built in Burbank, housing units, over the past decade?
Decade? I don't know.
If you had to just guess.
Housing unit,
Replacing older ones or brand new?
Brand new units. Units that weren't here before.
1,000, 2,000.
Less than 500. So, and Tulare was the big one, right, with 240 units approximately, I think, somewhere around there, 241. So, there's this perception, I think there's this misperception that there's been all of this development in the city, especially as it relates to housing. We've actually had very little housing development in the city. The problem is not the developer impact fees. The problem is trying to get anything done in the city. We have so much red tape and bureaucracy when you're trying to get any project approved. And it becomes very political, as we saw with Laterra and some other projects, that, certainly we can look at developer impact fees. I do believe that those need to, I don't know if we necessarily need to increase them, but I'm certainly willing to have that conversation. What we need to do is encourage there to be some growth within our city so that people are actually paying those developer impact fees, because they're not paying them now because we aren't really seeing any new developments in our city, other than some of the larger commercial projects like Avion or the Second Century project at Warner Brothers.
But even Tulare alone, we lost a lot of money in DIFs. That if that would have been built, in Pasadena or Glendale, much more in the coffers for the city.
So if there was a trade-off, right, if we could say, let's streamline the entitlement process, because there's been a lot more redevelopment in Glendale and Pasadena than we've had in Burbank. So that's, you got to find the balance, right? And so if we were to have some sort of trade-off, we could definitely have that conversation.
Great. You mentioned that your wife teaches in LA Unified, so this is a school question. And Roy and I raised our kids in Burbank schools, and we've been really active in the schools. And the school district in Burbank has been attempting to pass a new parcel tax to support the financial needs of the schools. Burbank voters did not pass these ballot measures in the last 2 elections. Are you in favor of a new parcel tax to support our schools?
I am. And I have children in BUSD as well. I have a daughter at Jordan, and my son's at McKinley, so, and my wife's a teacher. So I'm very invested in education and obviously in our local school district here. And, you know, I wrote a letter to the editor in favor of QS, to the leader. Had some concerns with I. I felt Measure I was run too similar to QS and felt that it was going to have the same fate as QS and not pass. What's on the table now is Prop 15, which is a split roll tax initiative, which basically is going to be a $100 million tax on businesses here in Burbank. And what people don't realize is, well, they say, well, landlords will pay that. Well, not necessarily, because most leases are triple net leases, which means the landlord passed through the cost of the insurance, I'm sorry, not the insurance, of the taxes, the property taxes to the tenant, right? So now the tenants are paying that. Well, what are the tenants going to do? They're going to pass that cost on to the consumer. So we all end up paying this $100 million tax, and it will increase the cost of living. So I'd rather have a tax that was appropriate for the school district, because I do believe the school district needs more money. I know, because I've asked my wife to look at working at BUSD, because, you know, it'd be great if she could work 5 minutes from home, right? Instead of having to drive out to Woodland Hills. She works at Taft High School. It's pre-COVID, it was an hour-long trip each way, and it was miserable. She'd have to take a 30% pay cut to work at BUSD versus LAUSD. She's on a pre-recession contract at LAUSD, and she's got to take a huge hit. So there is a wage gap here with our teachers. I want to make sure our teachers in Burbank are getting the pay they deserve. So I would be in favor of another parcel tax, as opposed to the alternative, which I see as Prop 15.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our city council imposed what we see as restrictions on our ability to publicly address and engage with our elected officials and city staff. One of these restrictions was the elimination of final public comment at the close of every city council meeting. Would you support us in our effort to have final orals reinstated at city council meetings?
I'm a huge advocate of free speech, but I'll be perfectly honest with you. I wouldn't support that. There's ample opportunity for any member of the public to address the council. You have the opening comments, the public comment period at the opening of the council meeting, and then you can address any agenda item. So you have, you know, a total of 6 minutes that each individual can speak to both the council and an agenda item. I think that's you know, satisfactory. I wouldn't support necessarily lengthening that process by having another public comment period at the end of the council session.
Thank you. We kind of touched on development and what some of us consider to be maybe not thoughtful development, overdevelopment. Many Burbank residents feel that we have a problem with overdevelopment that may be permanently changing the character of our community. What are your thoughts on overdevelopment in Burbank?
So once again, I think that's a misperception. I don't think there has been overdevelopment in Burbank. When we look at our neighbors, even North Hollywood, Pasadena, Glendale, Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, there's been a lot more development in those areas than we've had in Burbank over the last 10 years. What does concern me with changing the character and nature of our city is things like ADUs, the accessory dwelling units, right? We're going to turn every single family neighborhood into a multi-family neighborhood. And I've seen the outcome of this. My wife, once again, she grew up in Reseda, and her parents still live in that house. And LA City's been pushing ADUs for years. You know, it was Sacramento passed a law that was statewide last year. That's now in effect. But I've seen the effects of having ADUs. So my in-laws, they have 16 ADUs on their block, on one block. And my father-in-law has lived on that block his entire life. He actually grew up there, the house next door to where they live now. But they don't know their neighbors anymore. There's no parking. They have issues with trash. It's just a mess, and they just can't wait to move. They're actively looking to sell their house and move. So, you know, we have Sacramento basically kind of down our throat saying, hey, you guys aren't meeting your housing needs. You know, they set these RHNA goals, right, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, and they say, hey, you got to build 4,000 or 5,000 units over the last decade. Well, you only built 400 or 500. You know, we're going to pass laws that basically are going to take away your local control, your local housing policy control, and we're going to tell you how to do it. I don't want that for Burbank. I want Burbank to be able to determine what's best for Burbank and do it in the best interest of Burbank. And I think that ADUs are going to kill the character of our single-family neighborhoods, and I don't want to do that. If we're going to have, you know, meet those RHNA needs that the state sets for us, we're going to have to do something, you know, a little different. And when I say smart measured growth and building communities, it's looking at the areas where do we want to put, you know, more housing. And I think there's opportunities in downtown Burbank, and I think there's opportunities by the airport in the Golden State area to program those areas to have new developments, new neighborhoods, new communities that will help address our housing needs.
Thank you. If you are elected to City Council, the safety and quality of life of Burbank residents should be a priority. What would you consider to be the #1 priority for a City Council member?
Well, the big quality of life issues are, schools, our police, fire, public safety, parks and rec, infrastructure, those are major ones. For me personally, though, like I said, I'm very invested in schools, and that would be the #1 thing for me. I want to make sure that our city is, meeting the needs of our school district, and that we're having a better dialogue. One thing that concerns me is, I know there's been some tension in the past between the City Council and the school district, and I know a long time ago they used to have joint meetings on a regular schedule. I'd like to bring that back. One of the things I propose is having joint quarterly meetings between the school district and the school board and the City Council, because I think the right hand needs to know what the left hand is doing, and I think that's really important that they have that dialogue so they can mutually support each other and benefit each other.
We did see an example of that in the last election when the parcel tax failed again. Pasadena found a way of working with the schools and having some of their sales tax increase go to the schools. Burbank not so much. So to your point about them not getting
right
on the same level.
And now we're constitutionally capped. There could be no more increase in the sales tax, hopefully.
Thank you. Okay, one of the best kept secrets in Burbank is the addition of a large Amazon facility at the new Avion development. One, why do you think this has been kept a secret, and how do you feel this will affect the surrounding neighborhood and the entire community? And what do you think will happen to the new Avion development if and when the high-speed rail facility comes to that area?
Well, I don't know if it's a secret that Amazon was moving in. It's been pretty widely reported, but it hasn't been reported by, there's been no press releases by Amazon or by the developer. And that's due to
the city.
But they're all tied in these confidentiality agreements. I mean, you have Amazon, which is the 800-pound gorilla, basically, and they're driving the train. I mean, they're the ones who basically say, we don't want this to get out in the press. They make everyone sign confidentiality agreements, and so, that's why, it hasn't been addressed publicly. Your question, though, about Amazon being there, what specifically concerns you about having Amazon?
Well, we have lots of concerns, but this is about you and how you feel about the facility coming in. And I mean, we can talk later about how we feel about it.
Sure.
But this is really about you, how you feel about it. And then what you think will happen to that if the Amazon facility goes in, and then we talk about possibly the high-speed rail facility coming in. What do you think happens to the whole Avion property?
Well, the Amazon facility is going to go in. I mean, they're taking, I think, 700,000 square feet of space, and they're going to put an e-commerce facility there.
You can see the bays right now from Hollywood Way. It's there. The
right.
Loading bays, yeah.
Right. So they're going to have, Amazon is going to take that space, and that's pretty much a done deal. It doesn't. For now, well, it really doesn't concern me at all because it's actually going to bring a lot of jobs to the city, and it's also going to address the changing nature of our retail environment, right? And we've seen with this pandemic, like brick and mortar retail is really suffering. People have it, and I work in this sphere, so I'm very familiar with it. Brick and mortar retail was dying a death by 1,000 cuts, and COVID came in, basically chopped it off at the knees, right? So people now are getting more comfortable shopping online, even for groceries. And it's just changing the nature of the way we spend, we shop, we do things. I'll be honest with you. Every day I come home, there's Amazon boxes on my porch, and people are always afraid of change, but the change is going to happen regardless, and it's just about trying to manage that change and manage it so it's most beneficial to Burbank and to the residents here.
Just for the record, too, Amazon trying to move into San Bernardino. That's attempting to be being blocked by the state attorney general, citizen groups, environmental groups, and it's a smaller project in Burbank. So their track record, Amazon's track record, and the impacts they make that we're kind concerned about are kind of well documented, and it's
What-
interesting that it's been so quiet here in Burbank about this project.
What they want to do here is what they call their last mile delivery, right? You have these huge distribution centers out in the Inland Empire and San Bernardino and those areas. I mean, they have millions and millions, tens of millions of square feet out there. And so they take a facility like this, which is the last mile delivery. So they basically can serve the East San Fernando Valley. And, you know, if, you know, all of us are guilty of shopping with Amazon. And so, you know, I'm not going to get on my high horse and say, yeah, I'm not really a fan of Amazon being here when, you know, I'm a customer.
Great. We have one final question, maybe the most important question, a very tough question, and we're going to hold you to you know, your answer on this. Roy?
Bulldogs are Indians.
Well, I'm not a product of BUSD schools. I didn't grow up in the city.
That's okay.
But I will say,
Wasn't the question.
my kids are on track to go to John Burroughs, so Indians.
Very
You
good.
got right to.
Very good. We're Indians because our kids went there, but doesn't mean we don't love the Bulldogs too.
You've
Thank
got
you.
blue on right now, actually.
Yeah, look at that.
Speaking of them.
When my
Thank-
kids go there, I don't know if they'll be called the Indians anymore, though.
Oh, that's right.
That's true,
yeah,
too.
maybe not.
That's
So
right.
we'll see.
Thanks so much for
Yes.
joining us
Appreciate it.
and for being candid with your responses. And we encourage everybody in the community to check out all of our videos of the candidates and make an informed decision who you're going to vote for November 3rd. Whatever you do, vote. And we'll see you next time on the Mike and Roy Show.